And
No, not at all.
oh, I was on a train and Instagram came up and said it was going to say your warp command, but I was on a
Oh,
train, so I couldn't get it. So what was your warp command?
what was my warp command? Do I
The
have a warp
captain's
command?
chair. I got a video.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I ended up saying go fast, which is I think is Prodigy's line. Um, yeah, I didn't come up with one.
Oh no. Okay.
It's okay. I do want to be hurt. I want to be Janeway so badly though. So because I just started watching Voyager and I'm really enjoying it. I really am. I didn't know I was gonna like it so much.
Yeah, Voyager for me, it's kind of like the trippiest Trek. As the guy who does the
Really?
Twilight Zone series or podcast, I guess that makes sense, right? That I would be, attracted to the trippy Trek.
What
Yeah,
makes it trippy in your mind?
I'd probably Minosky and Brandon Braga to be perfectly honest, because those guys just make trippy episodes.
Sure. Like the one where Paris goes to pre post warp speed and they end up as lizards and stuff.
Yeah, I'll support Threshold. I like that episode.
So we're like in the middle of season 3. So there's like a whole slew of season episodes I haven't even watched yet. So I'm sure I wonder if it gets trippier. The Tuvix one is very it's sticking with me. I'm very upset about
Oh
Tuvix.
yeah, that one starts entire. You can have a full panel convention just about Tuvix, and people will be happy to show up for that.
I and think people will kill each other. It's more divisive than politics. Why it's a really it's the most Trek episode of any Trek I've ever watched.
Yeah, yeah, I could go with that. I mean, well, there's maybe some of the courtroom ones, but that's a different vibe than Tuvix, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean I love the cage and I love when Spock is like trying to defend Pike and stuff like that. That's really good. But I guess I more mean like the actual conundrum of having to deal with these two people being confused, but now this is a real human or real living being. What do you do? That seems like such an interesting future problem, you know. It's very
Yeah,
Black Mirror, actually, now that I think
yeah, I
about
can
it.
see that.
All
Fiction
right.
transporters, I guess, is
They
one
see
of the things.
well, I mean, I can't get over the fact that transporters kill you and give and re-upload your consciousness into a new body. I can't handle that. It's very Black Mirror though, and it's very Twilight Zone. So yeah, I guess it's totally in line with what we're supposed to do today. Occasionally I may mute like right now when there's a siren. Because
Oh, no problem.
will you hear them or
Probably not on Zoom, and
okay.
I for this I just use the Zoom. Yeah,
Okay.
you'll see. Well, you won't see me actually. Clearing throat, or just hitting the button.
I know. When I do it, it makes a whole big pop sound. So I can't do it
There,
because
I heard a little pop, but yeah, first time.
it's not good. Oh, maybe Zoom does a pretty good job of knocking out most of that stuff. But
I was gonna put out though my trippiest Star Trek episode, my five on the tripometer. You'll have to wait till you get to Enterprise, which is I think it's in season 2, and it's Singularity. Because
okay.
they go through some kind of nebula or something, and whatever the person was doing when they went into the nebula, they just become obsessed with that and that only. So it's like the engineer is just he spends the entire episode trying to fix the captain's chair to make it more comfortable,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
even when the ship is falling apart, they're like, "We need you to do whatever with the warp core." It's like, "I have to fix this chair," because he's so obsessed with
That
it.
sounds like drugs, man. Like you're like, oh no, but I have to re-wallpaper this room tonight, man.
Maybe that's why I like the episode so much.
Sure.
And of course, you got is it T'Pol on that show? Who's the Vulcan is not affected, so because you have to have someone whose mind is still somewhat working. So
Well, that's what really worked when I was on Bliss, because Bliss was the reason I started watching it. John had me on to talk about the episode where they're in that big monster that makes them want whatever they want, and I think that it's a wormhole basically while it's busy ingesting them. But Seven of Nine's the only one that it didn't work on. She even tried to logic with Tuvok, and Tuvok was like still like, well, but I want to go home. She was the only one that didn't wasn't affected. Her and Naomi Wildman because they've never been to Earth or they were afraid to go to Earth. So the desire part didn't work on them.
yeah, and we just finished doing a podcast on the TV show Space 1999, which is from the 70s, but it had an
Mm-hmm.
episode like that where a ship comes, like they're lost in deep space flying around on the moon, and a Earth ship shows up, and their friends and family are on the ship, and the only person who can see that they're actually giant spaghetti monsters is the captain for whatever reason.
How
He
interesting.
he just gets yeah, Walter Landau plays him, and he just gets like all the plot armor. Martin Landau, I knew I was saying his name wrong. He just gets all the plot armor in the world. He's always right, like in that show. It's
And
kind
that was what was good about TOS is that Kirk wasn't always right, but he was close to it, but he wasn't always right, you
no,
know?
it's Space 1999 is just funny because the captain is always right, and you're kind of wondering if it's the actor saying that the captain's always right. I
I
love
heard
Martin Landau. You know, Mission Impossible. He's in Ed Wood playing Bela Lugosi. He's great, but it sounds like him and Barbara Brain were like kind of the power couple on the set of that show.
that's interesting. Yeah, I heard a rumor that Patrick Stewart was very had very interesting writers to come back for Picard too, that would make him very uncaptain like. So I think sometimes the lead has a say, and sometimes you get people who can override the lead. So who knows?
And the most fun I had in Picard. I mean, season three is great, but season one where it has
I
Patrick
actually didn't
Stewart playing
watch it.
Picard trying to be French because you know Picard's a French character, but so
That's
it's Patrick
right.
Stewart doing this French character, and it's like kind of ridiculous and it's fun.
Love that. Well, one day I'll get to it sooner, slowly but surely, I'm sure.
Guess I'll turn the gear from Trek into the
Great.
Twilight Zone. One request just says Zoom has gotten gloopier. I'm just asking the guest to bring up the wiki page with the opening narration.
Oh, sure. Do you have the link?
I could pop that in the in those chat when I find it.
Perfect.
Chat, 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 chat. There's the chat. I guess I could just put the opening narration in the chat too,
Yeah.
but
Well, no, that's okay. Um,
well, click on that. It should work. Actually, that's maybe I don't know. That might be hard for the guest though, to read it out of the chat. So
no, it's all good.
a
Okay,
little
so whenever
tiny.
you're ready,
Okay, give it 5 seconds so I can spot the edit, and we'll begin.
picture of an aging man who
Oh,
leads his
oh,
life.
oh, I'll do the sorry, I'll do the intro and stuff first.
Sorry.
Sounded good
Okay.
though. I mean, well, you're a voice actor. It has to sound good.
Sure. I mean, it does have to.
Welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we delve into all of the episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond. As always, this is Matt here, coming back. It's been a few minutes, but from Mission Log to Orville, Jessica Lynn Verdi's here. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I have to
How
ask, did I get your last name right? Because I always, there's the composer too, and I always get it mixed up. There's a Verdi and a Verdi or whatever.
I would always, it's amazing. Actually, I'm used to all iterations. I always say that we do the anglicized version of just Verdi, which is very, Verdi. But there was a rumor we were related to Verde, and we are not. So
Okay, yeah, that's right. You know, I play an orchestra, so I've played a few of the operas with that guy's name at the top of the sheet. You know,
very prolific, very successful. Giuseppe. We have Giuseppes in our family, but they're Joes. So
right? No, I mean,
um,
I just get it. You know, my last name's Comages, and even people in my family will say the name slightly differently. And then if someone's like
sure.
Comegis, I'm like, I don't care, whatever. Say
At a
it
certain
however.
point, you've heard it all. Yeah, it didn't perk up for me. You saying it just now. Occasionally, there'll be some. I have a very funny short story. I was on a friend's channel playing video games, and they had like a really like lovely community of hundreds of people, and they had a live show, and I had just guested on one of their shows, and I was helping them run the door because it was like a small operation. And anyway, one of these guys, one of the community members, was late, and as I handed him the ticket for him to come into the event, he goes, Jessica Lynn Vernet? Because he had
That
just
one's
warned
off.
of me. Yeah, it was very off, but I didn't correct him because it was just so sweet that he was excited that he recognized me. And I was like, yeah, go on in, buddy. Have a good time.
There we
It was
go.
a good moment. Yeah.
Now, today, the only last name we have to deal with is the name Gordon, because every character in this episode of The Twilight Zone, a short drink from a certain fountain, is a Gordon.
That's right.
Three
That's right.
actors, they're all family. So,
In
um,
varying degrees.
well, yeah, I mean, legally they are family.
Legally
So,
family.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although at the end, hey, it's questionable how the law works in that. We'll get to that, I guess. But
Yeah.
I'll do a little trivia on this first. The original air date was December 13th, 1963. Teleplay is by Rod Serling, based off of a short story by Lou Holtz, I assume by the same name. Bernard Gerard directed. His credits include a number of genre films, including Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round, which is Harrison Ford's film debut.
Oh, that's
I think,
interesting.
yeah, it seems he did a little bit of acting and then went into carpentry for a while and then got pulled back out of the carpentry to be a Han Solo.
Yes, I think you do whatever you can to be to live until you finally make it big. I think that's
Right,
what.
right. I mean, I know he also showed up in American Graffiti and Apocalypse Now, so it wasn't like he hadn't done any acting. But yeah, his main jam was carpentry up until Star Wars, it seems.
Wow, great. Yeah, no, yeah, I did hear that, and I think it's very cool.
Along with the episode Miniature, this one was held up in copyright tangles for 20 years. It was not part of the Twilight Zone syndication package until 1984. The reason being both episodes had legal claims that they were plagiarized, which were later dropped. But yeah, there's so many
That's
short stories and
fascinating.
things that they take from, though. It seems like, I mean, by this point, half of Serling's scripts are like from a short story by blah blah. I think you
Right, absolutely.
by season
I
five,
mean,
they're running out of ideas.
but even in today's world, like you can look at almost every new television show that's coming out on Netflix, and you can pretty much draw a straight line from the movie in the 80s. It's now fictionalizing. So obviously the 80s and movie is fictional too, but I'm more mean that like, oh, that's like when Peggy Sue got married. Oh, that's like Groundhog's Day. Oh, that's like this. You do run out of stories at a certain point. You're just modernizing them.
A few weeks I was watching clips of Nick Cage and Peggy Sue got married, and I'm not sure if anyone could do that again. That was insane. Do you know what I'm
No,
talking about?
there are some very very bad things that go down in that movie. It's one of those things that you couldn't show it to somebody today that hadn't watched it previously. It's a tough
Yeah.
movie.
But if the listener doesn't remember, it's Nick Cage basically talking in a voice like this the whole time.
Like he's like doing his Elvis thing, and even Jim Carrey's in it. It's a
Yeah.
fascinating
I did
movie.
like his explanation of why he was doing that, though. He said it's because when Peggy Sue goes back in time, so when you're 18, this guy's the coolest guy ever. But when you're like 35 and you see him again, you're like, who is this dweeb?
I think that is the Nick Cage mystique, where you can't say he doesn't make a choice, and
Correct.
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but
Yes, that
somehow it works in a
would be
weird
that.
way. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's a guy you kind of want to watch go off the rails every once in a while, so it's fun.
absolutely.
For
Absolutely.
as for the actors in this episode, we have Patrick O'Neill played Harmon Gordon. While he did appear in films like Silent Night, Deadly Night, The Way We Were, and The Stepford Wives, it seems
Ooh.
his main jam was restaurateur. He and his
Hmm.
brother co-owned New York City restaurants such as The Ginger Man, The Landmark Tavern, and O'Neill's Balloon, not Saloon. Uh,
Balloon. That's
it,
silly.
it's said that the restaurant originally opened, I guess it didn't about the time of Prohibition, and New York City had prohibited the word saloon.
Uh-huh.
So, but they'd already made the signs. They're like, well, we could get one new letter instead of changing the whole sign.
I've been there when doodling and you got to change a letter, make a letter look like a letter, or it's like the common issue when you're switching over from the new year and you write 1998 but it's 99, so you got to figure out how to make the 8 look like a 9. I don't know if you've been there, but
I found myself trying to write a date out as 19 something like just a few days ago. We all live in our own time warps.
so
I
it totally it has happened to me before. That's so weird.
Well, I guess I'd probably been writing trivia for this or something and had just been writing 1990 blah blah or 19 something for the past, 20 minutes or something. Then
That's
I'm
a
doing
very
something
funny
real. I'm
thing.
like 19, wait, no, that's not right. Dream of the 90s though was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Ruta Lee was Flora Gordon. She had roles in films like Witness for the Prosecution and Funny Face. By the
Hmm.
70s, she was a mainstay of the celebrity game show circuit, showing up on Hollywood Squares' What's My Line, and she was Alex Trebek's co-host on High Rollers.
Oh,
So
funny.
then I was like,
She's
well, was she?
beautiful.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, she's beautiful on the outside in this episode. Ruta Lee is beautiful. Yes, okay. I guess I was
The
getting too
actress is
directly to
beautiful.
Flora Gordon. Yes.
That's fair.
Dr.
No,
Raymond
I was
Gordon.
kind of,
Oh,
yeah,
go
I was
ahead.
kind of, no, I was just gonna say I was kind of stunned by how beautiful she was. She was like almost Marilyn beautiful. But yes, carry on. Forgive
Yeah,
me for
no, I wasn't
being
going to throw that out as the as the dude, but yes, I was like, she seems to cut above our regular Twilight Zone ladies.
100%. And I'm sure they cast her for that very reason. Um, but yeah, she's stunning. She's stunning in this. But let's talk about the other Gordon.
Yes, our final Gordon is Dr. Raymond Gordon, played by Walter Brooke. To sum up his career in one word, plastics. He was that guy in The Graduate. Brooke also showed up in shows ranging from The Green Hornet to The Waltons to McHale's Navy.
Mm,
Which brings me to the end of the trivia. So if I could have you blast out that opening narration, please.
blasted out. Uh, Picture of an aging man who leads his life, as Thoreau said, in quiet desperation. Because Harmon Gordon is a, because Harmon Gordon is enslaved by a love affair with a wife 40 years his junior. Because of this, he runs when he should walk. He surrenders when simple pride dictates a stand. He pines away for the lost morning of his life when he should be enjoying the evening. In short, Mr. Harmon Gordon seeks a fountain of youth, and who's to say he won't find it? This happens to be the Twilight Zone.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So this is an episode new to me. I'm pretty sure it's new to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a random assigning. Sorry, a random assignment. Sometimes on a show, people request. Sometimes like, oh, I might know this episode, and I'll invite this person. This was just like, let's hope serendipity happens. So I don't know your initial views on the episode.
Well, yeah, for a second I was curious if you asked me to comment on this, particularly being an absolutely gorgeous woman who's completely self-involved and selfish. I thought that's maybe be why you asked me to join. Um, but gosh, let's put it this way. I don't know that this is a great episode in general, but I think it was interesting. The 21 minutes was really limiting to tell the story in the way that I really wanted it to be told. We just had to believe that this woman was the worst based off of a couple interactions, and then gets what she deserves in the end. And is that what she fully deserves? I don't know. It's just it was an interest. Wasn't the more it wasn't the best Twilight Zone I've ever watched, but it was interesting, and it definitely gave me Benjamin Button vibes. Did that ring for you?
Oh yeah, my mind canon name for this story is Now He Baby, which I think is how they were describing on the Blank Check podcast when they talked about Benjamin Button, just to give credit where it's due. But yeah, the
Now he
whole
baby.
Now He Baby, no
That's
articles
very
there.
funny. No, and she's now she ends up being the worst because of how she reacts to the situation when he has fully devolved into a toddler, let's say. So there is there is credence for her being labeled as this horrible person just with how a normal human empathetic, whatever would go, Jesus, I've got to take care of this thing. But this man is the doctor is so quick to be like, and F you, lady. You've got to take care of my brother, not my problem, not my baby.
Don't
Um,
hire anyone to do it. He did add that, which was pretty wild. He was like, "Don't get a governess, don't get a nanny. I'll know if you do that."
it's really interesting. That's making me wonder if there's like undertones of misogyny here. I don't know. I don't need to get that deep into this episode. Let's just put it this way. My initial impression is she's absolutely gorgeous. And also, have I talked about this with you on the show when I've been on in the past? Where I studied improv, they did an amazing improvised Twilight Zone. It was like one of their flagship shows. And they realized that the show, when improvised, was more successful when you kept it to one room and everyone had to deal with this strange event in the room. And this was a good example of how of them maybe improvising an episode, because all they're dealing with is basically the foyer and the middle of that apartment that they're living in. So this entire time while I was watching it, I was like, this would be a really great improvised version of Twilight Zone. That's just where
Yeah,
my
yeah,
head
there are
went.
a lot of one room ones. We had Mickey Rooney alone in a room for an entire episode several weeks ago. So
Yeah, it makes you buy that the Twilight Zone is happening just in a, in a specific place, and you don't have to then go figure out how the ripples go to the diner down the street, or you don't know too much past what's going on in this room, and it allows you to deal with the situation at hand. Yeah, what did you think about it? What was your impression?
Well, oh, actually, you were like, it might be a little misogynistic, but I don't want to bring that up. But that actually was the point I was thinking that in general, the Twilight Zone is a pretty progressive show for the early 60s. But this is like kind of where just the cracks of early 60s society come through because, I feel like Rod Serling's heart's in the right place. But this is just the
Yeah,
case where it's a little bit it feels a little dirty, the viewpoint. Like this is the viewpoint that every guy has in 1963, even if he's progressive.
that's a really interesting point, Matthew. So let's like look at the logistics, which is, again, it's a TV show, so bear that in mind. But this man probably married her. She's what, 30 now here in this
The
in this
actress was 28. I checked.
Okay, good to know. So that means he probably, if she was in a chorus line, how, I'm just trying to do the logic here. He's probably what, upward of 70 something as this older man now?
At
Is that
least
is
in his
that
60s. The actor, again, I checked him too because I was curious. He's 36. So
right?
he's shown much older at the start. I even like brought my daughter in for a second because I had the Blu-ray pause. I was like, "Look how obvious the makeup is," and she
It's
giggled
so
back.
it's so uncomfortable. I was like, okay, now I know what we're dealing with. When you hear the title, by the way, is wonderful. A short drink from a certain fountain is a fat. It's like just like a very vivid title. I like a good title. And then you see him, and you're like, okay, we're dealing with the fountain of youth here. Um, he is a man who probably when he was 60 met her when she was about 20, and he was probably able to give her a life that she wanted. They both went into this as adults knowing the transaction being he gets a hot young thing and she gets a life that she wants. Fast forward 10 years, he's 70, he's not doing well. He's probably closer to death than we really care to imagine, especially if he's talking about his ailments and he gets winded after dancing for 10 seconds. So she's resentful of the lifestyle she chose, which I guess is the only thing that makes her a true jerk in the situation. And he just wants to be able to please her. He wants to, or I don't know. Like, he's the one who's delusional in this situation. Actually, they're both delusional. I'm just trying to like put it into perspective. They're both not great.
Yeah, he's
They
cold
chose a
and weird.
lifestyle. Well, they chose a lifestyle together. And they chose, she chose to live rich, and he chose to live with the hot young thing. And point to me in every direction where that still exists. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a lifestyle I want, but they made this choice. And the problem, I think, then comes in where she's now resentful of the fact that he's older and she can't do anything. She's got money in her pocket. Go wherever you want, babe. She doesn't need to go with him. But do you think maybe she liked him at some point and now he's just not? I don't know.
It
I
seems
don't
he's
know.
successful. Like, okay, it's like one, the in the back of your head, of course, there's that little voice screaming, "She's a gold digger," which I don't
Of
want to just be
course.
that blunt. Like that's a little too blunt. Also, if it was 5, 6 years ago, and if he's like a strapping 55, it's a little weird. I don't have this perspective. When I was dating, I always dated people within like a 2-year range of myself.
Yeah, totally.
Like my wife is 9 months older than me. We would have been the same Japanese school year, but not the same American school year.
Okay.
Um, the only time I actually probably the most attractive person I ever dated was 8.5 years older than me, and I felt weird about it the whole time. Just that difference was like kind of like I just had to face facts like I can't, I'm not comfortable with that age difference in the end, you know?
What was it? Was it like because culturally you guys had different experiences, or just what was it? Was it because of how she looked? Like, I'm not assuming that, but what bothered you about it?
I don't know. I guess I just feel like my partner should be like somewhere close to my life experience. So maybe not so much
Yeah.
culturally, but just like perspective wise. So with the
Yeah.
Steely Dan thing, she don't know about the Queen of Soul, right?
Right. We can't dance together because you just don't. And listen, nothing's more attractive than a 19-year-old to a dude, right? Just biologically. But then when you start, that's a great great point. The Steely Dan song talks about it perfectly. She's hot. I'm sure I'd get down and have a good time. So I can't talk to her. There's no companionship at that point. Now, to be fair, my boyfriend and I are 6 years or so, and we still have enough cultural crossover and age relation. Like he's just a little bit younger on the spectrum of things. And occasionally like it shows up. I'm like, oh, am I accelerating his maturation, or is it an issue for us? But if I couldn't talk to him about shared experience, I don't know that it would work.
Yeah, in my actual relationship, it would be more of a cultural thing. Like I'll, like I'll hear some big hit from the 80s and, like, oh my God, this song. She's like, oh, it's this. I've never heard this in my life before. Whereas,
Oh,
because it
sure.
didn't play in Japan. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Wow. Yeah. There's some level where that's fun to like expose the other person to what they don't know about your like childhood and whatever. I have a feeling kids like that nowadays will be raised, even if you're like in the same country, because everything is so fractured on the internet. There, you may be like, we all listen to the same stuff on the radio growing up, and nowadays they don't have that unless you listen to Kiss FM, which most of these kids don't. So I wonder how they'll relate to each other later on. You could almost grow up in silos in this country, I think. Probably
Yeah.
not
Yeah. I
totally,
just
but
I just finished a book actually about like the first 10 years of MTV, where they're talking about once the reality shows start and, up to that point, like MTV is weird because it would actually play everything. Not at first. There were problems the first few years. Like they didn't want to
yeah,
play
I hear
rap and
David
stuff.
Bowie talk about it. Yeah, it's
Once they got
fascinating.
past that, but in the late 90s, excuse me, late 80s, early 90s, you'd put it on and it'd be an R&B song, then a hair metal song, then a pop song. The problem being the rap fan's going to turn it off when the hair metal comes on and vice
Right.
versa. But still, the cool thing was that was still kind of insinuating into everybody's like, we're the MTV generation, right? That's like how, when I came to get into music, it was from that.
I listened to Corn. I listened to System of a Down. I don't know that I would have listened to Limp Bizkit otherwise. I do think it's still a better heyday for music now because you don't need to be on a label in order to be successful. And you might make the argument that Corn is metal light or whatever, but it was still music I wouldn't have listened to and enjoyed otherwise, I don't think.
I guess the difference is like there's no central radio station, no central TV station that kind of gives you a primer, whatever. Whereas,
Yeah.
because now you're right, there's great music. You have to go searching for it. If you have to go to Bandcamp and find 100 terrible albums to find, three great ones.
Sure, totally. And I think there is still the main radio station, but they're only playing Ariana Grande and, you know, Sabrina Carpenter and like the stuff that the record labels are still trying to push on you. I did want to go back to what you said though, that like at first blush, in the zeitgeist of the world and not with our awoken psyche, you would call her a gold digger and you would demonize this woman as early as 5 years ago for marrying an older man. But we both know better now that that man's complicit in this relationship. So whether she's a gold digger or not, he gets a hot young thing. Like that was kind of my point that I was poorly making earlier, is that they both went into this relationship somewhat consciously and then just got dismayed with the results 10 years later. Does that make sense?
It does make sense because I assume it does seem that they actually had some fun at some point in time. Whereas a gold
They
digger, I
what do
assume
I have?
it's like someone decides to marry Rupert Murdoch again, hoping he'll pass off while she's married to him and not before the next one comes along, that sort
But
of thing.
he's also not an idiot if he's going to marry that person. He must know what he's like. Even Hugh Hefner knew what he was doing. He would surround himself, whether, I'm sure there's questionable methods with how Hugh went about it. But there are some men on this planet, if they have the means, are choosing to spend those means on women that otherwise wouldn't be there. And that is a choice two mostly salient adults are making. And instead, though, for a long time, women and men alike demonized that woman for that choice. And it seems like the brother is doing that here as well.
Yeah. This is this kind of parallels. This is an episode I'm guessing you didn't watch, but a few weeks ago we did a Uncle Simon, excuse me. Uncle Simon was so at age 20 or whatever, this woman starts taking care of her like 55-year-old ailing uncle or whatever. And they hate each other. The whole episode is parlor sniping, and now she's 40, he's dying, and he's created a robot just to keep the thing going. Like
So
he's
that
pro
they can snipe at each other
yeah,
for
he's
the rest of
programmed
the.
Robbie the robot to talk like himself and to be served hot chocolate by her. And it's like you cannot leave the house anymore. Like you lose your inheritance if you walk outside or you don't take care of the robot. I'm like, what? And this one the same thing. At the end, I'm like, she has choices, at the end of the episode where it's like you have to take care of this child, which the child does need someone to take care of it, but just like you are now stuck in this situation. I'm like, no, she isn't. You see,
Yeah, the brothers being so spiteful. It's like I'm all for her comeuppance a little bit. And the fact that she doesn't want to take care of baby Harmon Gordon, I think is the only thing I can really point to that says she's a bad person. Truly. That would be the only circumstance under which looking at it with 2024 eyes where I go, yeah, she kind of sucks there because she's not decent enough to go, I will take care of this baby. Because you're right, he can't take care of himself. Someone needs to. But the brother going, you can't get help. You're going to be a single mom, but go fuck yourself. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know if we can. I always forget if we
I have a
can.
great censor.
Okay, wonderful. Um, uh, Basically, like he's saying, you can't live a life. Your sole existence is to take care of this child. And if you get a babysitter, I'll know. That's going to be this guy's second full-time job is keeping an eye on this woman when in reality, he could help rear the child if he's a family member and somewhat responsible for making him this way. Granted, like Harmon's insane and is going to accept the treatment to, the cellular treatment, whether he's advised to or not. I love the name Harmon, by the way. I really do. I like it as a first name.
Armand Gordon. I also, when I was doing the trivia, the director's name kind of like Bernard Gerard. I was like, am I gonna like somehow it's like,
Bernard Gerard.
yeah, it kind of rolls around like gravel in your mouth when
Yeah,
you
that's
say
very
those names
funny.
together. Um, I was wondering, they do not make it clear if what's going on in Harmon's head at the end, if he's a grown man trapped in a baby, that's weird. And when he's 5 years old, is he going to be like a highly intelligent 5-year-old with 60 years of experience under his belt? Well, 70 by that point.
That is a very good question that I actually didn't even ponder because you have to think like he's probably is it did he lose that stuff because he wasn't losing himself when he was aging and he was still a young man.
Right.
Huh, I wonder.
Because that
Maybe he's
actually would
just
change things. If he is still mentally an adult, that changes the situation somewhat. I mean, obviously, for a few years, yeah, he's now an actual baby and he's going to need assistance. But once he's,
right.
able to run and jump and play, I mean, he might be able to run into an office and not that I want saying that's the platonic ideal being an adult, but he should be able to do like higher mental stuff at that point.
My guess is he would still be a slave to cognitive functions um and like actual chemistry, like the prepubescent, postpubescent mood swings. So he's probably, I think that's the world that I'd buy, where he's like he's still intelligent, but when he's 13, he's still got raging hormones,
Yeah,
and he's
exactly.
maybe
But
not thinking totally clearly because of that.
and then he's already got a wife, and that's kind of creepy on another angle.
Well, yeah, I think that's sailed. That ship has sailed of any romance. It's interesting.
We should hope so.
Yeah, I just mean that, like, obviously, let me ask you this question, and I'm sorry to make you have this thought experiment. If you didn't have children and your wife underwent this procedure and became a child, what would you do?
Oh, that adds depth to this episode. What would I do? Here's the weird thing, though. I mean, I live with we still live with the in-laws, so I guess we'd all just do a group taking care of. I would have help to start with, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think the question is, does she love Harmon enough to take care of him in quote unquote sickness and health?
Or is it going to
You
be in
know,
spite? Take care of him in spite.
in spite of the, no, exactly. I think that's why I'm saying there wasn't real love in this relationship to begin with. I don't demonize her for that, by the way, because they were adults that made this choice to get married, and he wanted a beautiful woman. She's also young. She should have just left, truly. She should have just left. She would have figured it out. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. She had a perfectly fine choice because Dr. Gordon is still going to take care of his brother, which it's mean. It's a little, it's not, she might regret it, feel bad about it, but she has the choice.
if I were her, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna take care of this baby, and then I would, if I were her, not Jessica as her, at me as her, I would figure out how to get as much money as I possibly could, and then leave the baby in an orphanage. She doesn't have to take care of this baby. She really doesn't. But my grander point, and the reason I asked you is, if you truly love somebody and they turn into this situation, it's actually an allegory for if they, let's say, God forbid, your partner becomes, a paraplegic and like they don't want the plug pulled or something. If they become, I know the correct term isn't vegetable, but I can't think of it. Like, mentally
Brain
brain
dead?
dead or something. Or like I know people who took care of their mother after a terrible accident and a surgery, like left her functional but not totally there, but she wasn't totally gone. You now are taking care of like a human that's like a child, basically, that can't care for themselves. So that's a really tough position for anybody, no matter the degree of love that you have for them, I would imagine. I wish that on nobody. It's a very tough position to be in, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, like my aunt took care of my grandfather at the end of his life. He was, physically
Right.
not able to do much, and then my grandmother was physically fine, but her, the ship had sailed on
Yeah.
cognizance. So yeah, of course, my grandfather would try to just make the joke: if you put the both of us together, you'll get a functioning human. But
My friend does that with her parents too. Like the one whole parent is together. And but that is tough because when you're dealing with humans that aren't functioning at their peak or somewhat peak self-reliance, that does the situation of like taking care of that person does fall to somebody else. I think Carmen just needed to do a better job in surrounding himself with somebody who actually gave a flying F about him. You know what I mean?
yeah, here's an interesting bit of production, by the way. Just I think that colors our conversation, because the change is something we've been talking about. It's that initially the Raymond Gordon character was to be a typical family physician and not the brother, it seems. So, disturbed by the character's
Oh,
willingness to experiment on a fellow human, CBS asked that his occupation be changed to that of a research scientist. So, the network was feeling a little like, no, it has to be a family member who's not a medical doctor.
that's that does change the dynamics for sure. Because also you don't have the ending working as well too, where this just random doctor who makes house calls has a complete moral judgment on the wife. It does, it's bad, but it's a little bit more believable coming from a family member.
Well, it happens in STD educational films of that period where they go in the doctor and the doctor gives them a good talking to.
I'm sure. Now listen, little lady, you're gonna have to take care of your man. I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of those that you can watch on YouTube.
Oh my god.
But that does interestingly change the dynamic. But yeah, I
It
think
does.
that's a good change here. So I think it works better the way in the episode. So for once the network was right, I guess.
Yeah, it's good input. It's, like I said at the top, I don't know that this would go down in history as like the best way I've ever spent 21 minutes, although I'm grateful to be back and talk to you about that. So it gets a wonderful hour to talk about these things. I just don't know, maybe if I was watching this in 1960, I would have enjoyed this episode more. But watching it now, I'm like, all these people suck. All of them are jerks. And the only thing I really enjoyed was how beautiful she was. She was stunning.
Yeah, I'm looking what he's really interesting. That narration you read, I check sometimes just to see how dour he is on the characters, and this is all talking crap about Harmon. He doesn't even really mention much about Flora here, except a wife 40 years his junior.
I
Um,
thought it was interesting that he was talking about Gordon just like not accepting the fact that he's in a certain stage of his life. I
yeah,
think I think that's what I took away from the opening narration. I think any one of us would want a longer, more virile life if possible. And probably Harmon was staving that off as long as possible, especially by marrying a younger woman. Um, and this woman is not empathetic though to his situation whatsoever. Like he's not a well man. He's very old. You got to live a lovely lifestyle, and she is being a jerk about it for sure. So
yeah, I get. And I guess you're older in the Twilight Zone because even when he's a young man now, I'm like 32. I'm like, are you? But I think that's just 1963 Hollywood, you know?
100%. You look at like all the, starlets of golden age Hollywood, and they're like 22 and they look like they're closing in on 40. They really do. It's amazing.
Flora doesn't Flora, yeah. So I get Ruta Lee. Let's give Ruta Lee credit, not Flora, because hopefully Ruta was more fun than Flora in here.
I mean, who knows? She did tap into this entitled woman. I guess my thesis on the whole thing is like they're just complicit in this. They're adults. And
Here's a,
and yeah.
I was just thinking, like the 10 seconds of dancing, it did look like both of them were having fun for those 10 seconds until he gets winded.
I think they liked each other at one point. I really do. I think you said that. Especially when he like starts to age down a little bit and he's like just kind of, a little bit of silver in his hair. And she's being reminded of the man she was probably initially attracted to. Um, she probably just didn't have a lot of foresight in realizing a 60-year-old man turns into 70, 75 really quickly, and you may not be she just liked him for his looks and his money, probably.
Mm. And they had some
Eh,
fun, which isn't the same as having a deep relationship necessarily.
oh no, not at all. Like, to the point where if she actually truly did love him, which we do get the vibe that she doesn't at the beginning, she would have been more gentle with him as he was aging. Um, or she would have decided to stay with him and take care of him when he became a toddler. And she didn't want to. She was forced into that for sure.
Now the research doctor, when he's trying to talk him out of using the super serum. So at first I'm like, is he going to turn like the Eric Bana Ang Lee
Mm.
Hawk? That came to mind, of course, from a lot
Sure.
of
I was
perspectives.
I was curious if we were gonna get some Cronenberg-esque something.
But the actual options put out were mutated freak, gibbering idiot, and mindless shell. So I guess in the end he's a gibbering idiot.
Oh,
I'm like, which one of those
yeah.
actually took, you know?
Yeah, that's a very yeah. At a certain point, you have to take him for his word. That's a good point. I think gibbering idiot is exactly right.
Yeah. Oh
That
no, he
makes a
might
lot of
be a
sense.
mindless shell. We weren't sure about what his mental fortitude is once he's a baby. So
I think out of any, if him actually, that's just it. It's like, how could they have controlled how much he was going to de-age? But if you didn't get the intended result that Harmon wanted, which was to be a younger man, him turning into a baby is like the best next is the next best scenario, because you certainly could have just turned into goo or what have you. Actually, I did just watch the Voyager episode where Cass is stuck in a time loop where she's not getting younger and she goes back into
oh, it ends
Inception
with the
basically.
inner mother's womb. Yes.
So it kind of reminds me of that. That could have been the worst case scenario here.
That's yeah, it was like he's gonna keep going past that. So if he's just reset, I mean, you know what? And maybe it might be really good for him. He's got a second chance at life. How many people get that? Because he
Sounds
was
like
at
that's
the
what he
end.
wanted, kind of,
Yeah. He's getting a slightly different, he's getting the monkey's paw version, but I think he could still make good out of it.
He's getting
25 years
the
down the road, maybe he's gonna have a better life than the first time. He won't make the same mistakes, maybe, you know?
with all his money. I'm sure he's gonna be very fine. This guy, I don't feel that bad for him. I really don't.
Although I'm not sure how the legal stuff works out. You know, when you go into court and it's like, well, he was 70 years old and now he's a baby. So how does that work in a court of law? I mean,
That's
there's
what I
science
mean.
involved, I guess. So
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is like the brother's the villain in the story, I think.
right. He's more hateful than the hateful woman. The brother's
It's
the real
true.
hater here. Yeah.
It's true. I think so. I think they're all bad people. I don't enjoy watching a story where everyone's not nice, and I don't feel bad for anyone going through what they've gone through in this so far.
I'm noticing more and more one because co-host Mark called it out, and season 5 just seems to be wall to wall parlor sniping, which if you like it, it's fun. Not wall to wall. There's plenty of episodes that don't have it, but yeah, there's just been a lot more of that, and a lot more of like you are now stuck in this situation from kind of a hateful character. So it's kind of
Huh.
weird.
Is this the last season too? Is that
This
right?
well, the last season of the original show, yes.
Right, right, right. So maybe they were just also like treading water and didn't know where to go next after
Yeah, the old producer's gone by this point. You know, Rod is
phoning
probably
it in.
losing some interest in doing it at this point. So,
Sure.
there are very good things in season 5 to be sure, but
You get Nightmare at 50,000 feet, right? In this
yeah, we
season.
did that. We did that with your co-host.
Oh, that was a perfect person to have on for that, for
Yeah, well,
sure.
you gotta invite the guy who flies planes for that, don't
You
you?
do. You gotta 100%. We've all
And
been
Shatner,
there.
Star Trek connection. I mean, what more do you need?
It's insane. It's too good. There's a man on the wing. It's too good. It's very good.
Let's do a few questions on this one though.
Sure.
The first one, there's only 3 choices, I guess, on who goes in or through the Twilight Zone.
Oh. Ooh.
We got Harmon, we got Flora,
What do
we've
you
got
think?
the Doc. Um, I was just gonna set it straight on Harmon because he makes a weird, unnatural choice. With the other two, they of course watched it happen. They watched a Twilight Zone happen, but they're stuck in a terrible in-law relationship and possible legalese from this point. That's not the Twilight Zone. That's just living your worst life. But Harmon he's done something totally weird and and unnatural. So
Yeah, I mean, you don't get that opportunity if the brother isn't a research scientist, but he's not living in the Twilight Zone. I think you're right, especially because the open narration is about Harmon as well. He's at the end of his rope, and this is the Twilight Zone offering what he wants. For sure, I agree.
so did the Twilight Zone do him a solid then? Because I don't know if it's did he deserve it? I laid out the options and he took up the choice, right? Mutated, freak, gibbering idiot, mindless shell. He said, "Okay, let's go." So
Yes.
in that way, he deserved it. But is the Twilight? It ultimately is the Twilight Zone doing him a service? It's not doing Flora a service. Caught in the wake of it all, but it might, like I said, it might do him a real service.
Yeah, but then you have to think that by the time he's 20, Flora's 50 or something. So are they trying to say that he's going to be in that position where she is? Like it's basically like this snake eating its tail kind of situation. I don't know that it did him a solid. It took away his autonomy for about 15 years or 20 years. And
Yeah.
that sucks. But if it were me and I was at the end of my life and I was given another chance to live another 70 years, if I did okay, I'd take it. So yes, probably ultimately.
It's almost like I need to get a lawyer to tell me how this guy's going to work out in the end. You know, in this situation, what does the law say? New York law. I'll just assume they're in New York. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm curious too. I'd love to hear your audience's take on that. I'm curious.
I guess you have to make new precedents in that case. But yeah.
Yeah. Or the brother becomes the executor or something like that, probably.
Let's go. Well, so the difficult question to ask is, did Flora deserve her ending? Which I think she has a choice out and doesn't have to accept it. But the show is like, she's comeuppances happened. She is now doing this for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I don't think she deserves it as much as we're being told she does. And I don't think she deserves the circumstances under which she's being told, especially because the brother who did not go through the Twilight Zone is the one setting the terms for her here, just based out of spite.
Yeah, I like I said, I think this episode is a little too raw towards her.
Yeah, I think so too.
You could have had a 60s style sitcom called The Baby Husband after this, though. That would have been
You
fine, you
sure
know.
you
Come
sure
on,
could have.
come on, right after The Flying Nun, you know, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh. Totally. I couldn't agree more.
Oh, just one shout out because yeah, that hip home bar we see at the beginning, I really
Uh-huh.
want that. The
Yes.
Scotch decanters.
Oh,
Um,
I want her coffee thing, and I want her outfit that she wears when she wakes up. Are you kidding? It's gorgeous.
yeah, when I was in my 20s, we go hang out with my friends who were well married at the time, but uh she had just gotten a bunch of Art Deco stuff, so she had like the 30s style mirror bar, not mirror ball. You know, well, within reason. We were in our 20s and cheap, but we had it going. We had a few of the decanters going, and it was cool. So
That's so cool. Yeah,
so
there's some
I
they did it right then. They lounged correctly.
yes. We were not dancing, but yeah, I was just like, okay, that makes it. I do see a sliver of like having a fun time in my 20s in the 10 seconds of dancing, you know. It
Sure,
felt
totally.
convincing, and I just needed to call out the cool stuff in the apartment house, whatever it is. I guess it's like a penthouse apartment. That's the impression I got.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Let's put this one on the tripometer. 0 being very trippy, 5 being extremely trippy.
Ooh.
Decimal
I'm
points are fine.
okay. I'm good. 4.5. It's weird to have a husband go to a baby. I think that's weird. But
Yeah, as we've been talking about, I came in before the episode or before we recorded this podcast, basically thinking about 2.5 or 3, but I'm gonna go up to 3.5,
okay.
basically because of the conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, the more you think about it, the weirder it gets. So
Yeah, Harmon got real warped for sure, and the whole world just shifted for him. I just think that I would hate to have my partner infantilize even more, if that makes sense. So that'd be pretty
yeah,
trippy.
yeah, that I guess this actually kind of is an exception to the rule that when well to cite him out co-host Andrew I often say he says the trippiest is when you can't see how the characters will go on after the episode. For him, that's high on the
Mm.
trip, which I generally agree with.
Oh,
But in this one, I'm like, no, the characters definitely go on after this, but
I
it's a
actually
weird
totally.
situation.
That's a very good point. I have a very clear idea of how they move on from this point, begrudgingly so. But that's why I thought it was interesting. And I didn't think about this until you and I started talking too. This is an interesting allegory for what it's like to take care of a loved one who's no longer able to take care of themselves, but still alive. So, um, I empathize for people that are in that position. And I hope you don't have a caretaker that is as jerky as Flora is.
Yeah.
So maybe it's
I,
not that trippy when you look at it that way.
yeah. If I was going to writer's hat this show, I would make Flora just like a little nicer. I think that would make it more resonant. She could still be a little snitty, that's fine, but just don't make her such a villainess, you know?
Again, that's why I do. You're right that I was hesitant to bring up misogyny because I don't want to be like the token woman being like it's misogynistic, but it is because she's the sole bad person in the situation. That's the issue I keep on coming up against. But I think um the more interesting choice would be to have her as like, oh god, this sucks. I remember when you could go out dancing with me, and she was like, she liked him a little bit more, and then when she realized he was a baby, watch her make the choice that she didn't want to do this. Like that's an even worse heel turn. Probably a little more interesting too,
Here's the difference I would like in this episode. I think instead of having a heart full of hate, she's more like
Mm-hmm.
lashing out, kind of the situation you just said. This is a bit of a weird metaphor, but it's just because I recently watched it. Lilo and Stitch.
Okay.
Lilo at the beginning of the movie is a bully. She punches a girl in the face, the other girls run away from her, but it's
Oh,
clear that she's in kind of a bad situation
she's in a
familiar
funk.
wise, and she is lashing out. It's made clear that
Wow.
this is not malice that she's doing this with. That's what I'd like to see here. It could basically be the same Flora, but this Flora seems filled with malice, and I'd like to see one that feels more trapped, and that's why she's acting a little bit, you know, fussy or whatever.
Yeah, I can get with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Did you have any other notes or observations you wanted to throw on this episode?
Not really. I just strongly encourage you, if you haven't watched it yet, go look at this woman be beautiful for 21 minutes. She, even though she's ugly on the inside.
Turn the sound off
um
if you need to.
yeah. She's gorgeous. She literally is just so gorgeous. And yeah, consider the situation, consider the people that you are in your life surrounded by. Do your best to be grateful for the mental state that they're currently in and the current state of your relationship, and be grateful for every moment because it could change in on a heartbeat.
All right. That sounds like a good way to pad it out. So I will ask you what's going on in your podcasting world or otherwise. So,
Well, yeah, for those of you that don't know, in our mission log crossover people, I am now as an associate producer to John Champion over at Roddenberry Podcasts, and we're working on a bunch of new things. We're also working on like enhancing the presence of Roddenberry podcasts on the social sphere. So that's been a really, really awesome culmination of ways I've worked with them, but now working with Roddenberry in a more official capacity, if that makes sense. Also, by the time this airs, I imagine Mike and I will be in the middle of a very cool giveaway that you'll have to go listen to an episode of Mission Log the Orville in order to find out what it is about, because just in the off chance we don't get to it by the time this airs, just make sure you're following along with Mission Log the Orville to find out about a really cool Orville giveaway that we're doing. And that's, I think that's about it for now.
all righty. And yeah, folks should watch the Orville if they haven't already. So, and then listen to your
Yeah.
commentary on it. And
Yeah.
Ted, by the way, I didn't even know there was a Ted series until you did a podcast on it. And
I genuinely wanted to do it because it's a good show. I was like, damn. And also the crossover, there's just so many Orville people in it that it made sense to talk about it. But it was a good time.
I
So we
watched the
did Talking
show,
Ted.
then I went back to watch the original movie, and I was like, the original movie's not that great.
Oh, really? I watched the movie first, and I did enjoy it, but it is a lot of dick fart piss jokes for sure. But
Yeah,
I like that stuff.
but I'm just like after watching the episodes of the show, I missed that vibe when I went back to the movie, you know?
The show's sweeter. It really is. The show has more of an all in the family vibe. Um, Seth is a huge Norman Lear fan, and it is like a love letter to Norman Lear in a way. So yeah, the movies don't retain that vibe as much for sure.
Okay. I think that's what I was picking up on. Okay, there we
Yep.
go.
Yep.
Um, as for us, we're Time Enough Podcast. You can find us while you're listening to us on a podcast catcher, I guess, but give us a good review or something if you want. We do a lot of podcasting around here. I talk about really good movies and really bad movies according to IMDb users on the podcast Films and Filth. Podcast 1999 was talking about Space 1999, but it confusingly is now talking about Planet of the Apes. So we're working through the ape movies at the moment. We're going ape. It's great.
That's amazing. And are you doing stuff on the Mission Log Discord talking about some of this stuff too? Or
Oh yeah. If you are on the Mission Log Discord, I do chats. It's my Sunday night. Okay, on Tokyo time, it's 8 p.m. Sunday night. For everyone else, it is another time because it's the international chat where people who are not up at American hours or they're up at weird American hours come in and talk about Star Trek. And then every other Sunday night in the US, I do time enough to chat where we actually do talk about some of these Twilight Zone episodes and both of them have some regulars now. So there's usually something cooking over there. Come check it out.
very cool.
And for now, just have a drink and decide if you're going to become a mutated freak, gibbering idiot, or mindless shell. Your choice.
That's if given the choice, I don't know what I'd choose yet.
You
Thanks
got
for
certain
having me.
start of the world. Thanks for coming in. Okay, I can spot that distance. Oh, the other one to mention, two things. I just didn't want to ramble on too much, but yeah. Also, after watching the TED show for the Disney podcast I do, we did a dark Disney month for October and watched all of those. We did Black Hole, Watcher in the Woods, which is the one that's in the
Yeah, I
episode.
was scared to watch it.
Something Wicked This Way Comes, and Return to Oz, which of course is the creepiest because it has the room full of heads. If you've ever seen that.
Oh, I have not. Maybe I have. Yeah, there's some things that like you don't remember you watched until you see a clip of it and you're like, "Oh my God, that I there was a scene
Return
from
to Oz is at
Tremors
the
2."
top of that list, by the way.
Okay, I'll look into it because it sounds somewhat familiar now that you're talking about it, and that might unlock a core memory. I have to pee and I have to go remove laundry, but I love doing this and I'm so grateful that you thought of me to do
I
this.
think I got your name on another one down the list, which I'll get to you soon. And sorry, I know you got to go, but I do have to
Oh, no, it's okay.
apologize. We were talking about Coco, and we had to do Coco because Luke's
Oh,
girlfriend is Mexican, and she had a friend living in Japan who animates, and we are like, we're current, so no.
that's totally fair and I appreciate it and I wasn't keeping tabs, but I just
I didn't think
I
so, but I did mention. Then I was like, wait, animator, Mexican animator. We can't really say no.
no, you got to do that. Don't you worry about it. I'm around and whenever it works, I'm available.
Okay, get to your stuff. Catch you later. Then thanks.
Yeah, it was good to see